The first sign of trouble, in a neighborhood where trouble meant your trash cans were visible after 6 p.m. on a non-collection day, was a glint of sunlight off a clipboard. It was a Saturday morning, 9:04 a.m. I was on my front porch, enjoying my first cup of coffee and the sweet, sweet silence of a suburban weekend. I live in Pleasant Valley Estates, a name so aggressively cheerful it had to be hiding something. And it was. It was hiding the fact that Pleasant Valley was a beige prison, a monument to the color taupe, ruled with an iron fist by the Homeowners Association. And the warden of that prison was Brenda. Brenda was our HOA president. She was a woman who looked like she actively disapproved of oxygen for being too celebratory. She was currently easing her golf cart, the official chariot of the petty tyrant, past my house at a speed that would make a glacier look impatient. She stopped. The golf cart sighed, as if it too were exhausted by her mission. I watched over the rim of my coffee mug as she disembarked. She was in her full uniform, a pastel yellow visor, a crisp white polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts that were ironed to a military crease, and blindingly white sneakers. She held the clipboard against her chest like a ballistic shield. She wasn't looking at my lawn, perfectly manicured per regulations. She wasn't looking at my house, painted approved eggshell as mandated. She was looking at my driveway. I squinted. What was wrong with my driveway? It was a driveway. Gray. Flat. A place for cars. Brenda, however, saw something I didn't. She took a step onto the concrete, then another. She leaned over, her hands on her knees, like a baseball umpire inspecting a scuff on home plate. Then, and I swear I'm not making this up, she got down on one knee. She ran a single, accusatory finger along a line in the concrete. I half expected her to pull out a magnifying glass and a little evidence bag. My internal monologue, which is usually just a loop of old commercial jingles and me reminding myself to buy milk, kicked into overdrive. What could it be? Did my car leak oil? Is the shade of gray non-compliant? Did a bird poop on it in a way that violates the aesthetic harmony clause? She stood up, made a sharp, decisive X on her clipboard, and got back in her cart. She gave my house one last look of profound disappointment and glided away, a beige shark returning to the deep. I didn't have to wait long. The official decree arrived at 4:00 p.m. Not in the mailbox, of course. That would be too impersonal. No, the HOA violation letter is always a crisp white envelope, tucked with passive-aggressive precision into the seam of your front door, right at eye level. It felt less like a notice and more like being served with a warrant for crimes against conformity. I opened it. The paper felt too thick, too expensive. Pleasant Valley Estates. Homeowners Association. Preserving perfection. One bylaw at a time. Official notice of violation. Date: October 31st, 2025. Resident: Frank H. Palmer. Resident 142. Address 142 Snapdragon Lane. Dear Resident 142, it has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, that your property is in violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs. Violation. Bylaw 8.4, Surface Integrity and Community Aesthetics. Description. A visual inspection on the morning of this date revealed that your driveway, hereafter the surface, is in an unacceptable state of disrepair. Multiple cracks, fissures, and cosmetic faults have been noted. These faults are not only unsightly and detract from the uniform appearance of Pleasant Valley estates, but they also constitute a potential trip hazard to the community. I stopped reading and looked out the window. "A trip hazard?" I muttered. "You'd have to be an ant wearing stilettos to trip on what I saw." I read on. Required action. You are hereby required to repair and fill all visible cracks on the surface within 14 days of this notice. All repairs must be completed using an RC-approved neutral gray polymer concrete sealant. A list of approved brands, Quiet Cement, Subtle Stone, and Municipal Gray No. 4, is available at the HOA office. Penalty. Failure to comply by the deadline, November 14, 2025, will result in an initial fine of $150 to holders and a subsequent fine of $50 handlers for every day the violation remains uncured. We trust you will give this matter the immediate attention it deserves. Sincerely, Brenda M. Gillespie, President, Pleasant Valley HOA. I went outside, letter in hand, and stared at the hazardous fissures. They were hairline cracks, the kind of tiny web-like cracks all concrete gets when it has the audacity to exist in a place with seasons. One of them looked vaguely like a map of a very skinny giraffe. It was, without question, the dumbest, pettiest, most Brenda-tastic thing I had ever seen. "Neutral gray sealant," I said to my empty driveway. "Because God forbid we introduce a second shade of gray into the neighborhood." Brenda wasn't just a busybody. She was a color vampire, and she had just declared war on my driveway. My first instinct was, of course, to do nothing, to let the fines pile up until they formed a small, papery mountain I could set on fire. But that was the irrational part of my brain. The rational part, the one that paid my mortgage, knew that Brenda had the legal power to eventually put a lien on my house, over a crack. So, with a sigh so deep it practically rustled the HOA-approved Japanese maple in my yard, I decided to comply, or at least attempt to. The next day, Sunday, I drove to the local big-box hardware store, Constructo Mart. I wandered through the automatic doors, past the mountains of Halloween candy, and into the vast, dusty canyons of building supplies. I found the concrete aisle and was immediately confronted by a wall of tubes, buckets, and bags, all promising to fix, seal, and beautify. I flagged down an employee. He was a kid, maybe 20, with a name tag that said Chad, and a spectacular lack of enthusiasm. "Hey, Chad," I said. "I need to fill some small cracks in my driveway. My HOA is passionate about it." Chad's eyes lit up with the dull spark of shared misery. "Oh, HOA." He didn't even have to think. "You'll want the Grave Day Gray 5000, aisle 12 on the left, next to the asphalt embalmer." I followed him. "Seriously? Grave Day Gray? Huh, yeah, that's just what we call it." He pointed to a rack of gray caulking tubes. The label was less inspiring. "Municipal-grade concrete sealant, color neutral gray No. 4. It was the exact one from Brenda's list. "This is it, man," Chad said, tapping the tube. "This is the one they all make you use. It's uniform, dries real dark, real gray." I picked it up. It was heavy. It looked like a tube of distilled depression. "Don't you have anything else?" I asked, desperation creeping in. "Like a nice tan, a sandstone color, maybe something with a little sparkle? Anything that doesn't look like it was squeezed from a rock that lost the will to live? Chad just shrugged, the universal gesture for, I get paid $14 an hour, this ain't my problem. This is the standard, man. You use anything else, they just make you scrape it out and do it again with this. I held the tube of gray sludge. I pictured myself, on my hands and knees, piping this ugly, joyless paste into my driveway. It wasn't a repair. It was a scar. They weren't just making me fix a problem. They were forcing me to make my own property uglier in the name of uniformity. I couldn't do it. I put the tube back. Thanks, Chad. I went home and got on my computer. There had to be a better way. I wasn't an unreasonable guy. I just didn't want my driveway to look like a poorly stitched autopsy. I found a high-end epoxy resin kit online. It was designed for filling cracks in patios and pool decks. It was strong, durable, and it came in a beautiful, subtle terracotta color. It was earthy. It was warm. It would blend in perfectly with the brickwork on my house. This, I thought, this is a compromise. Trying to be a good, proactive neighbor, I printed out the product specs. I filled out an architectural modification request form from the HOA website, a document that required more information than my last tax return. I attached the product photos and a polite note. This resin is stronger, will last longer, and aesthetically matches the home's existing brick trim. I was going to drop it in the HOA drop box at the community clubhouse, but as I walked out my door, I saw her. Brenda. She was at the community mailbox hub, auditing the outgoing mail slot, probably. I decided to be direct. "Brenda, hi," I called, waving the papers. She turned, her face pinching. "Frank, I trust you're on your way to purchase the sealant?" "Actually, Brenda, I was just coming to submit this." I handed her the paperwork. I found a much better solution. It's a high-end epoxy resin. It'll last decades, and it's a nice terracotta color. It'll blend right in with my brick. Brenda looked at the photo of the terracotta resin like it had personally insulted her. Her nose wrinkled. "Terracotta?" she said, the word coming out of her mouth like a small, foul-tasting animal. "Frank, we are not a Southwestern-themed community. The bylaws are explicit. Bylaw 8.4 specifies neutral gray sealant." Actually, Brenda, I reread it. It recommends neutral gray. It doesn't mandate it. This is a repair. It's a better repair. She fixed me with a look of icy condescension. "Frank, it's a slippery slope." "A slippery slope? From terracotta-colored filler? What's next? I start wearing a poncho?" "First, it's terracotta driveways," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Then it's flamingos." She shuddered. "Then it's cars on blocks, people painting their houses purple. The gray sealant is the standard. It is uniform. It is final." She shoved the paperwork back into my hand. "Your request is denied. You have 12 days. She turned and marched back to her golf cart, her white sneakers squeaking with self-righteousness. I stood there, holding the specs for a perfectly nice 80 repair kit, and I felt a little-used, very dangerous gear slip into place in my brain. "Final," I muttered. "We'll see about final." I spent the next 2 days in a cold rage. I sat in my home office, staring at the rejection letter. Slippery slope. Flamingos. The gray sealant is final. Final. That was the word that kept snagging in my head. Brenda didn't just want compliance. She wanted surrender. She wanted me to admit that my driveway's tiny, insignificant, harmless cracks were a moral failing, and that the only absolution was a tube of grave day gray. I looked out the window at the offending surface. The skinny giraffe crack seemed to be mocking me. "Fine," I said to the empty room. "If I'm going to fix these cracks, I'm going to fix them. I'm going to make them the most fixed cracks in the history of home repair." She wanted me to fill them, but she never said, "No, wait." I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my computer. I read bylaw 8.4 again and again. Required to repair and fill all visible cracks. It specified the goal, repair and fill, but not the method. It recommended the gray sludge, but as I'd pointed out, it didn't mandate it. That was the loophole. She had denied my terracotta resin not because it violated the letter of the bylaw, but because it violated the unwritten, beige-soaked spirit of Brenda's will. My denial of the resin wasn't a legal denial. It was a power play. "Okay, Brenda," I said, leaning into my monitor. "You want me to fill the cracks. You got it." My mind was racing. If I'm not using the approved gray, and I'm not using the unapproved terracotta, what am I using? What fills a crack? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Creative crack repair. How to fix driveway ugly? Alternative to concrete sealant. I scrolled past pages of ugly sealant. I scrolled past asphalt patches. I scrolled past videos of guys with blowtorches. And then I saw it. It wasn't a hardware store ad. It was an art blog. The title was Kintsugi, the Art of Golden Repair. I clicked. I read. Kintsugi, the article explained, is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by mending the areas of breakage with lacquer dusted or mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. I stared at a picture of a beautiful ceramic bowl, a web of brilliant gold veins running through it where it had once been shattered. The philosophy, the article continued, is to treat breakage and repair as part of the history of an object rather than something to disguise. The cracks are not hidden. They are illuminated. They become the most beautiful part of the piece. A slow, dangerous, absolutely beautiful grin spread across my face. "Don't hide the cracks," I whispered. "Highlight them. Make them the main event." I started laughing. A full, barking laugh that probably made my beige-loving neighbors nervous. Brenda was worried about terracotta? Oh, you sweet summer child. I wasn't going to fill the cracks. I was going to immortalize them. My search terms changed. Local mosaic artist, outdoor tile artist commission, guerrilla artist large scale. I wasn't looking for a concrete guy. I was looking for a rebel. I clicked through a few portfolio sites. Most were nice, tame, backsplashes, garden paths, live, laugh, love, in gentle pastels. Not what I needed. And then I found her website. The homepage loaded, and my monitor immediately looked like it had been force-fed a pound of Skittles. The background was a clashing pattern of neon pink and electric yellow. The font was a swirling, unreadable script. The tagline, in blinking rainbow letters, read, "Luna's Radiant Designs. I make boring things beautiful and loud." The portfolio was insane. A mural of a psychedelic octopus on the side of a taco truck. A mailbox shaped like a 3-foot-tall, glitter-encrusted dragon. A series of bowling balls she'd covered in shattered mirrors and spikes and turned into demon garden gnomes. This was it. This was my contractor. I found the contact page. It just said, "Call me. If you text, I'll know you're boring." I dialed the number. It rang once. "Speak," a voice chirped. It sounded like wind chimes and coffee. Hi, is this Luna?" "It is. Who's this? Are you calling about the Dragon mailbox? Because the wait list is like 6 months, but I can put you on it." "No, actually," I said, trying to sound professional. "My name is Frank, and I have a very strange commission for you." "Strange is my favorite flavor," she said. "What's up?" "I have an HOA, a very beige HOA, and they're fining me for some tiny cracks in my driveway. I need to fill them." Ugh, HOAs. The beige Stapo. I'm sorry, man. I don't really do gray sludge. "That's the thing," I said, my heart starting to pound. "I'm not thinking gray sludge. I was thinking, how do you feel about kintsugi?" "Kintsugi? The gold pottery thing?" "Yeah, but on a 40-foot slab of concrete, in the middle of the beige Stapo's capital city." There was a long, delicious pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing. Then a sharp, delighted cackle burst out of the phone. Are you serious?" she yelled, and I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You want to fill your driveway cracks with Mosaic tile?" "I want to fill them," I said, feeling the grin return. "With the brightest, most obnoxiously beautiful, technically compliant Mosaic tiles you can find. I want every crack to look like a lightning bolt from God." "Oh my God," she said. "I love you. I'm in my van. I'll be there in an hour. Don't let your driveway move." She hung up. I stood in my silent, approved eggshell house, and for the first time since I moved in, I felt a genuine thrill of joy. 58 minutes later, a vehicle pulled up to my curb that made Brenda's beige golf cart look even more pathetic. It was a 1990s Astro van. Or at least it had been, in a former life. Now, it was a work of art. The van itself was painted a deep, matte black, but every square inch of it was covered in bright, swirling, hand-painted mandalas and psychedelic flowers. It looked like a rolling Grateful Dead concert. The driver's side door had a quote painted in elegant silver script. "Creativity is rebellion." The hubcaps were bright, spinning pinwheels of color. The driver's door creaked open, and she hopped out. She was not what I expected. She was small, maybe in her late 20s, and looked like she subsisted entirely on caffeine and glitter. She wore paint-splattered black overalls over a neon pink t-shirt, a pair of scuffed-up combat boots, and bright turquoise-framed glasses that were so big they threatened to take over her face. Her hair was a chaotic mess of dark curls, and she had a sketchbook tucked under one arm and a massive dented metal water bottle in the other. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, taking in the street. Snapdragon Lane. A perfect repeating row of identical houses, identical lawns, identical mailboxes. "Whoa," she said, her voice just as energetic as it was on the phone. "Your neighborhood looks like it's been desaturated in Photoshop. It's so calm." "It's not calm," I said, walking down the driveway to meet her. "It's comatose." "I'm Frank. Thanks for coming so fast." "Luna." She shook my hand, and her grip was surprisingly strong. "No problem. I had to see this. A crack in the matrix." She grinned, tapping her temple. "So, where's the patient?" "You're standing on it." Luna looked down. She walked over to the skinny giraffe crack, her boots scuffing the concrete. She crouched down, just as Brenda had. But her reaction was different. "Oh, these are gorgeous," she whispered. I blinked. The cracks? Yeah. She ran her fingers along it, her eyes wide behind the turquoise frames. They're like little rivers. Look at this one. It forks. It's got movement. And this one over here? She jogged over to the cluster near my garage. It's got this nice little spiderweb action. It's dynamic. She looked up at me, positively beaming. The gray sludge that lady, Brenda, wanted you to use? That's just... Ugh, that's shaming the driveway. That's like telling it you're old and broken and you should be invisible. We're not going to do that. She hopped up. We're going to celebrate it. She sat cross-legged, right in the middle of my driveway, flipped open her sketchbook, and pulled a fistful of colored pencils from her overall pocket. Okay, tell me about the bylaws again, she said, already sketching. The exact wording. I sat down a few feet away, feeling like a co-conspirator. It says I'm required to repair and fill them. It recommends neutral gray sealant, but it doesn't mandate it. The loophole, as I see it, is that it doesn't forbid, well, this. Perfect. Luna's pencil was flying. So we're not just filling, we're repairing, which means it has to be permanent and functional. We can't just, like, pour glitter in there. Right. It has to be a repair. Okay. So we're not just using tile. We're using shattered ceramic and glass tile, set in a 2-part marine-grade epoxy mortar. Is that strong? Strong? She laughed. Frank, when we're done, the cracks will be the strongest part of your entire driveway. You could park a tank on this. It'll be 100% permanent, weatherproof, waterproof, and iceproof. It is, by every technical and legal definition, a repair. In fact, it's a structural upgrade. She flipped the sketchbook around. Even in a rough sketch, it was breathtaking. She had traced the existing cracks and turned them into a branching, organic, living thing. So, what colors? I asked. All of them, she said immediately. But I'm thinking a base of electric blue and bright, fiery orange, like they're fighting, and for the big cluster near the garage, a sunburst, exploding with yellow and gold. She tapped the pencil on her chin. Oh, and mirrors. Mirrors? Yeah, little bits of broken mirror, just little flecks. So when the sun hits it at the right angle, it shines. It'll be like actively sparkling. I had a vision of Brenda driving by on her morning patrol, being blinded by the sheer, reflective glory of my compliance. It'll cast reflections, you mean? Totally, Luna said, catching my train of thought. Right into your neighbor's, what did you call it? Aggressive putty living room window? I was in love. Not with Luna. Okay, maybe a little. But with the entire, beautiful, malicious idea. Luna, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You're hired. How much? She flipped to a new page in her sketchbook and started scribbling down numbers. Well, the diamond blade for the concrete saw to prep the channels, the epoxy mortar, the grout, the sealant, and then the tile. I get my mirror glass from a salvage yard, but the ceramic I buy new, plus my labor, and this is probably a 4-day job, and the aggravating an HOA surcharge. She tore out the page and handed it to me. The quote was significant. It was almost exactly 10 times the initial $150 fine. I could have just paid the fine, bought the gray sludge, and been done with it for under $200. This was an investment. I looked at the number. I looked at the sketch of the exploding sunburst. I pictured Brenda's face. I pulled out my checkbook. Do you need a deposit? Half up front, half when Brenda cries, she said. Deal. I wrote the check. My hand wasn't even shaking. "Okay," she said, hopping up and jogging back to her van. "I'll be back tomorrow at 8 a.m. "And Frank?" "Yeah? You might want to buy some earplugs for your neighbors. Day one is loud." I watched her drive away, the pinwheel hubcaps spinning, leaving a trail of creative rebellion in her wake. I looked at the check carbon in my hand. It was the most expensive up yours in history, and it was going to be worth every single glorious penny. The next morning, I was on my porch with my coffee at 7:55 a.m. At 7:59, Luna's psychedelic van rumbled down the street. She was not messing around. She pulled up, hopped out, and gave me a little salute. "Morning, Captain. Time to make some trouble." She threw open the back doors of the van, and it was an organized chaos wonderland. Buckets of tile, sorted by color, sledgehammers, sacks of mortar, and a very, very serious-looking concrete saw with a diamond-tipped blade. She immediately set up 2 bright orange cones at the end of my driveway and strung up yellow caution tape. Then, she planted a custom-made sign on my lawn. It was hand-painted, bright yellow, and said, "Caution, art in progress. Do not disturb the genius." "Okay," she yelled over the idle of her generator. "Step 1. We gotta make the cracks receptive to the art." "What does that mean?" I yelled back. "It means I'm gonna use the saw to widen them. We need to make a clean, deep channel for the mortar to grip. This is the repair part." She pulled on a pair of goggles, a heavy-duty respirator, and earmuffs. She looked like a post-apocalyptic pixie. She yanked the ripcord on the concrete saw. The sound that erupted was unholy. It was a high-pitched, grinding, deafening shriek that I felt in my teeth. It was the sound of 1,000 dentists drilling at once. It was the sound of a banshee getting a root canal. In the comatose silence of Snapdragon Lane at 8:02 a.m., it was a nuclear bomb. I saw it immediately. 2 streets over, a curtain twitched, then another. Lights flicked on in houses that were usually dark. My next-door neighbor's yappy little dog, Sir Reginald, started barking his head off. Luna was completely in the zone. She was tracing the skinny giraffe crack with the blade, sending up a little cloud of concrete dust. It didn't take long for the first scout to appear. It was Todd. Todd lived across the street and was the HOA's self-appointed vice president of snitching. He was one of those guys who mowed his lawn in a perfect diagonal pattern and reported people whose recycling bins were overflowing in a non-aesthetic manner. He wandered over, wearing a silk dressing gown and slippers, holding a mug that said, "World's Best Dad." His kids were terrifying. He stood on the sidewalk, just outside the caution tape, squinting. Luna, oblivious, finished a line, and the saw's shriek died, replaced by the generator's hum. Frank?" Todd called out, his voice annoyingly nasal. "It's 8 in the morning." "Good morning, Todd," I said cheerfully, taking a sip of coffee. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Frank, what is that?" He pointed at the saw. That's a saw." "Good eye, Todd. Frank, you're making the cracks bigger." He looked genuinely distressed. "The letter said to fill them, not excavate them." "Yep, gotta do it right, Todd. Can't just slap some gunk on top," I said, parroting what Luna had told me. "Gotta get all the structural weakness out first. Widen the channel for the epoxy mortar. Safety first, you know. Don't want any trip hazards left over." Todd looked at Luna, who had pulled off her respirator and was chugging water. Is that the approved sealant?" he asked, pointing at her buckets. "Oh no," I said, shaking my head gravely. "This is much more complex. It's a multi-stage compound, very high-tech, very European. Todd did not look convinced. Brenda is not going to like this noise. It's a construction project, Todd. Perfectly legal after 7 a.m., according to town ordinance. We'll be done with the saw by this afternoon. Todd gave me a long, suspicious stare, then scurried back inside, no doubt to dial Brenda's private number. Luna grinned at me and put her respirator back on. "Showtime," she said, and fired up the saw again. Shraa! The sawing lasted for 5 hours. It was 5 hours of glorious, house-shaking, nerve-jangling noise. By 2:00 p.m., the sawing was done. The air was settling. And now, the art began. Luna mixed the first batch of epoxy mortar. It was thick and gray, but it didn't stay that way. She dumped in a pigment, a brilliant electric blue. She knelt, trowel in hand, and began smoothing the blue mortar into the channel of the skinny giraffe crack. Then, she took a hammer, tapped a large cobalt blue ceramic tile, and began pressing the shattered pieces into the mortar. I sat on my porch, utterly mesmerized. It was amazing. The first line of blue, sharp and bright against the dull, 40-year-old concrete, was like a splash of cold water. It was alive. Every other house on this street was a corpse, and my driveway was suddenly breathing. By the end of day 1, the entire giraffe was a river of blue. The next morning, as Luna started on the sunburst section, my other neighbor, Gary, wandered over. Gary was a quiet guy, a widower who mostly kept to himself. His only act of rebellion, which had earned him a $50 fine, was painting his mailbox a non-standard, overly cheerful shade of royal blue. He held a coffee mug, and he just stared. "Morning, Gary," I said quietly. He didn't look at me. He just looked at the driveway. The sunburst section was already taking shape, a spiral of bright yellows and fiery oranges. "Frank," he said, his voice a low whisper. What is it? It's beautiful." "It's my repair, Gary," I said. "HOA compliant." Gary looked around, as if to make sure Brenda wasn't hiding in the approved azalea bushes. Then a slow, wide grin spread across his face. "You're a madman," he whispered. "A glorious, beautiful madman." "Just fixing a crack, Gary." "Brenda," he said, the grin turning mischievous, "is going to have an aneurysm, a full-on, vein-popping aneurysm." "We can only hope, Gary," I said, raising my mug in a toast. "We can only hope." He nodded, took one last look, and went back to his house. I could hear him chuckling all the way up his walkway. Day 3. The mirror day. The sunburst was done, the blue river was set, and now Luna was adding the finishing touches. Tiny, sharp flecks of mirror glass pressed into the still wet grout that separated the larger tiles. It was detail work. It was quiet. Too quiet. I had been waiting for this. The Todd sighting on day 1 was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. At 10:15 a.m., the beige golf cart appeared. It wasn't gliding this time. It was flying. Brenda came around the corner of Snapdragon and Hemlock at top speed, her visor threatening to take flight. She didn't just stop. She screeched to a halt at the end of my driveway, kicking up a small puff of aggressive putty dust. The caution tape I'd strung up seemed to personally offend her. She got out. Slowly, her hands were clenched at her sides. Her face which was usually a pale, disapproving mask, was a mottled, unhealthy shade of pink. She stood at the end of the driveway, just staring. Luna, on her knees by the garage, her back to the street, was humming along to some punk rock song playing on her phone speaker. Brenda took a deep breath. And then she spoke. Her voice was not a yell. It was something far more terrifying. It was a low, flat, dead tone, the sound of a person who has seen pure, undiluted chaos and is trying to process it. "Frank?" I was waiting for her. I'd set a chair up on the porch. "Brenda, hi. Lovely morning, isn't it? We're almost done." "What?" She took a step onto the sidewalk, but no further. She pointed a trembling finger. "This." "This?" I said, feigning cheerfulness. "This is the repair. Isn't it great? I'm fixing the cracks, just like you told me to. We're in the final grouting stage right now." "This?" she sputtered. "This is tile. This is a patio. You've installed a patio in your driveway." No, Brenda, it's definitely a repair. See?" I walked over to the Blue River. There used to be a crack right here. A very dangerous, unsightly crack. Now? No crack. I tapped the tile with my foot. "It's filled, ergo repaired. The violation is cured. I feel so much safer." Luna, hearing the new voice, finally popped up from behind her grout bucket. She pushed her turquoise glasses up her nose and gave Brenda a huge paint-smeared smile. "Hi, I'm Luna. I'm the contractor," she said brightly. "It's structural Mosaic infill. It's actually stronger than the original concrete. The two-part epoxy mortar bonds directly with the substrate, and the ceramic tile provides a compressive strength that's, well, it's way, way higher than his old cracked slab. And it's sealed against water and ice. It's a superior repair." Brenda's eyes darted from Luna to me, and back to the driveway. Her brain seemed to be short-circuiting, trying to reconcile superior repair with the electric blue and exploding orange thing in front of her. You, she stammered. "This is not neutral gray. This is blue and orange, and is that a mirror?" She'd spotted the mirror flex. The sun had just come out from behind a cloud, and the sunburst was, as promised, sparkling. It was shooting tiny, dazzling pinpricks of light all over the street. "It is," I said, shielding my eyes like I was looking at a holy relic. "Reflects the sun. It's beautiful. Probably lowers my heating bill by reflecting light away from the asphalt. It's eco-friendly, Brenda. We're thinking green." That was the breaking point. The facade of calm, icy control shattered. "This is a mockery!" she shrieked, and I saw Sir Reginald peek out from behind Gary's curtains. "You are mocking the bylaws. You are mocking this community. You are mocking me!" "Brenda, I assure you I am embracing the bylaws," I said, putting a hand on my heart. "I had a crack. I filled it. My conscience and my driveway are clear. Now, if you'll excuse us, Luna has to grout the rest of the sunburst before this mortar sets. It's a very complex European process, you understand." Brenda was shaking. Her face had gone from pink to a deep, alarming purple. "You will be fined," she screamed, jabbing her finger at me. "You will be fined for unapproved aesthetic expression. You will be fined for flagrant disregard for harmony." I am calling the police. This is vandalism. This is property damage." "Brenda, it's my property," I said, but she was already marching back to her cart. "You'll be hearing from our lawyers. You'll be hearing from everyone. You will rue this day, Frank Palmer." She jumped into her cart and sped off, her tires squealing on the pristine asphalt. I watched her go. The cloud of aggressive putty dust she'd kicked up slowly settled. The only sound was Luna's punk rock and Sir Reginald's frantic yapping. I looked at Luna. Luna looked at me. A slow smile spread across her grout-smeared face. We both burst out laughing. "Well," I said, wiping a tear from my eye, "I think she took that well. Phase 1 complete." Brenda, it turns out, was not bluffing. About an hour later, just as Luna was cleaning her tools, a very official-looking police cruiser pulled up. It didn't pull into my driveway, which was, to be fair, an active and fabulous work zone, but it parked right on the street in front. My stomach did a little flip. It's one thing to wage a war of petty bylaws with an HOA president. It's another thing entirely when actual bad-carrying law enforcement shows up. 2 officers got out. The first one, the driver, looked like he was 2 days from retirement and had seen everything. His name tag read Miller. He had a magnificent mustache and an air of profound, unshakable tiredness. The second officer was younger, sharp, and looked like he was desperately trying to maintain a professional expression. His tag read Chen. And of course, trotting right behind them from her golf cart, which she'd parked across the street, was Brenda. She was pointing. "That's him, officer," she said, her voice high and tight. "That's the man, Frank Palmer. And that's his accomplice." Luna, who was washing grout off her hands with a water bottle, just waved. Officer Miller plodded up the walkway. Officer Chen stayed a step behind him, his eyes flicking from me to the driveway and back. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "Afternoon, sir," Officer Miller said. His voice was a gravelly rumble. "I'm Officer Miller. This is Officer Chen. We, got a call about a disturbance." He pulled out his notepad. "Something about property destruction and community vandalism?" I put on my most polite, baffled, law-abiding citizen face. "Afternoon, officers. This is my property. That's Luna, my contractor. We're finishing up a repair job." "A repair?" Brenda shrieked from the sidewalk. "He's destroying the neighborhood. He's doing it to spite me. Look at it. It's an eyesore. It's blinding. It's not gray. Tell him to stop. Tell him to arrest him." Officer Miller looked at Brenda. He looked at me. He looked down at the driveway. He spent a long, long time looking at the driveway. He seemed to be paying special attention to the sunburst section. Officer Chen, meanwhile, was definitely smiling. He was hiding it by pretending to write something very, very important in his notepad. "An eyesore, huh?" Officer Miller said, looking back at Brenda. "Yes, it's gaudy. It's unapproved. He's vandalizing his own property to vandalize the community's aesthetic." Officer Miller sighed. It was a sigh that carried the weight of 20 years of dealing with people like Brenda. He turned back to me. "Sir, is this your house?" "Yes, sir. Lived here 8 years. And you hired this young lady to do this to your driveway?" "Yes, officer. See, I got a notice from the HOA." I pulled the original, crinkled letter from my back pocket. Said I had cracks and fissures, and that they were a trip hazard. Said I had 14 days to repair and fill them. I pointed at the Blue River. So that's what we did. We repaired and filled them, used a 2-part epoxy mortar and tile. It's a structural fix, stronger than the original concrete. No more trip hazard. We're just curing the violation, sir. Being good, safe neighbors. Officer Miller looked at Officer Chen. Officer Chen coughed, a sound that was suspiciously like a laugh. "A trip hazard," Miller repeated, deadpan. He looked at the driveway again. "And the mirrors?" "That's for eco-friendly reflectivity, officer," Luna piped up, wiping her hands. "Keeps the surface cool." Miller's mustache twitched. He turned back to Brenda, who was practically vibrating with indignation on the sidewalk. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, his voice flat, "is this his house?" "Yes, but the HOA bylaws..." "Ma'am, this is a civil issue. Property damage is when you damage someone else's property. Vandalism is when you deface someone else's property. This is his property." "But it's horrible," Brenda wailed. "That," Officer Miller said, "is a matter of opinion. And it's not a police matter. It's colorful. But it's not a crime." He tucked his notepad back in his pocket. "Sir, are you, I don't know, painting profanity on your house? Are you building something that's going to fall on someone? Are you blasting music at 3 a.m.? "No, sir," I said. "Just fixing a crack. We were just packing up." "Then I suggest you," he nodded at me. "And you," he nodded at Luna. "Have a good day." He then turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, please do not use 911 for your homeowner association disputes. That is something we can fine you for." But aesthetic harmony." "Have a good day, ma'am." Officer Miller turned and plodded back to his cruiser. Officer Chen gave me a quick, sharp nod, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "Nice work," he muttered to Luna as he passed her. They got in their car and drove away. Brenda was left on the sidewalk, alone, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She had brought in the law, and the law had, in effect, told her to shut up. I gave her a polite, neighborly little wave. She made a sound like a kettle boiling, stomped back to her golf cart, and sped away. The revolution, it turns out, was not televised at first. It was posted on Facebook. Gary, my quiet, blue mailbox painting neighbor, had apparently been watching the entire police encounter from his upstairs office window. That window, as it happened, had the perfect vantage point. That evening, after Luna had packed up and left, leaving the driveway to cure, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Gary. "Check the town Facebook page. You're famous." I pulled up the Pleasant Valley Community Forum, a page usually dedicated to lost cats and complaints about the local high school's parking situation. Gary had posted a photo. But it wasn't just a photo. He'd taken it at the golden hour, right as the sun was setting. The angle was perfect. The sun was hitting the mirror flex, and the entire sunburst looked like it was literally on fire. The Blue River was deep and gorgeous. The photo was stunning. The caption he wrote was pure, understated genius. "Hi, neighbors. Some of you may know my friend and neighbor, Frank Palmer, over on Snapdragon. He recently received an HOA violation for unsightly cracks in his driveway. He was told to repair and fill them. This is his repair, which he and a local artist named Luna just completed. I, for one, think it's the most beautiful thing in Pleasant Valley. Long live the Kintsugi driveway." The post had been up for 1 hour. It already had 400 likes and over 150 comments. I started to read. Debbie S. from up the street. "OMG, is that the one Brenda called the cops about today? I saw the cruiser. This is RT. Brenda is a tyrant. Mark P. from the next town over. This is the level of petty I aspire to. I'm driving by to see this tomorrow. 10:10, no notes. Brenda M. Gillespie, HOA President. This is an unapproved, flagrant violation of Bylaw 2.1, Aesthetic Harmony, and is currently under legal review. It is an eyesore and a mockery of this community's standards. Gary K., my neighbor. At Brenda M. Gillespie. I think you'll find it's a superior repair. And a lot prettier than your aggressive putty trim. Just saying, some guy I didn't know. Gary with the savage reply. Another stranger. I'm with Frank. HOAs are out of control. This is beautiful. It just kept going. It was a landslide. The post was being shared, and shared again. Kintsugi driveway was trending, at least in our zip code. By the next morning, it had broken containment. I was making coffee at 8 a.m. when I saw a van pull up. It was white, with a big Channel 8 News logo on the side. A woman in a very professional blue dress hopped out, followed by a cameraman. I opened the door before they could even knock. "Frank Palmer?" the reporter asked, smiling. "That's me. Hi, I'm Cindy Matthews with Channel 8. We saw a fascinating post on social media last night about your driveway. We were wondering if you'd be willing to tell us your side of the story." My side of the story? Oh, I was so willing. I'd called Luna and told her to get over here, fast. She arrived in 10 minutes, wearing her Creativity is Rebellion overalls, and we stood in front of my magnificent, sparkling driveway for the interview. "Frank," Cindy said, the camera light flicking on, "your driveway is the talk of the town. They're calling it the Shard, the Rainbow Crack, and my favorite, the Kintsugi driveway. What's the story here?" I did my best to look humble. Concerned, even. "Honestly, Cindy," I said, looking right into the camera, "I was just following the rules. The HOA, my president Brenda, notified me that I had a safety hazard. A trip hazard, in fact. And I took that very seriously. I mean, the safety of my neighbors is paramount." I motioned to the driveway. "So I hired the best artisan I could find, Luna here, to perform a full, permanent, structural repair. We just believe that if you're going to fix something, you shouldn't just hide it. You should do it with pride. You should make it better than it was before. We cured the violation." The camera panned to Luna, who was absolutely glowing. "Art shouldn't be trapped in museums, Cindy," she said, vibrating with passion. "It belongs on our streets, in our homes, and yes, even in our cracks. We're just finding the beauty in the broken. It's a structural and a spiritual repair." The story aired on the 5 p.m. news, and the 6 p.m., and the 10 p.m. They loved it. The human interest story of the little guy fighting the big, bad HOA with art. The HOA's Facebook page was review-bombed. People were leaving one-star reviews with comments like, "Let Frank's driveway sparkle," and "Free the Snapdragon 142. Brenda was now to the entire town. Brenda the Beige. The entire weekend, there was a slow, steady stream of cars driving by my house. People would slow down, take pictures, and give me a thumbs up if I was on the porch. It wasn't a driveway anymore. It was a local landmark. Brenda, I noted, had not been seen on her golf cart in 48 hours. The email went out on Monday morning. Subject: Urgent. Emergency HOA meeting. Bylaw violation 142, Snapdragon LN. It was called for Tuesday night. The community clubhouse, a building that usually smelled of stale coffee and desperation, was packed. I had never seen this many people at an HOA meeting. Usually it was just Brenda, Todd, and 2 other board members who looked like they were being held captive. Tonight? The room was standing room only. Gary was there. Mrs. Peters, whose provocative petunias had earned her a warning, was there. Dozens of other faces I'd only ever seen checking their mail were there, all crammed into flimsy folding chairs. And, parked respectfully and 100% legally on the street outside, was the Channel 8 news van. Cindy Matthews had called and asked if I minded. I did not mind. I walked in, and the room went quiet. I saw a few people give me small, encouraging nods. I saw Todd, sitting next to Brenda at the front table, glare at me. Brenda banged a tiny, ridiculous gavel. This emergency meeting of the Pleasant Valley HOA is now in session. We are here to discuss a single grave issue: the flagrant, unapproved, and rebellious action taken by resident 104-2, Frank Palmer. She had a slideshow. Of course, she had a slideshow. She dimmed the lights, and the first image on the projector screen was a blurry, zoomed-in, highly unflattering photo of my driveway. "This spectacle," she spat, "has been erected in direct defiance of the R-key. It is a flagrant violation of aesthetic harmony as defined in Bylaw 2.1. It is gaudy." "It's pretty," someone yelled from the back. Brenda ignored them. "It has brought ridicule upon our community. The news is here. We are a laughingstock. This kintsugi nonsense opens the door for anarchy." She clicked to the next slide. It was a picture of a house painted in rainbow colors. "This is what's next. Is this what we want? Anarchy? Chaos? Flamingos?" The room was silent. "Therefore," Brenda said, her voice shaking with righteous fury, "I am proposing an emergency motion, an immediate fine of $5,000 for failure to comply and aesthetic defiance, and a cease and desist order legally compelling Mr. Palmer to hire an approved contractor, remove this mess, and re-pour his entire driveway at his own expense." A gasp went through the room. Re-pour the whole driveway? That was thousands of dollars. "This," Brenda finished, "will be followed by his removal from the community if he fails to comply. We must cut out this cancer before it spreads. Is there any discussion?" She looked around, a smug, tight-lipped smile on her face. She thought she had me. I stood up. I wasn't in my usual jeans. I was wearing a nice blazer. I felt like a lawyer. "I have some discussion," I said. The whole room turned to me. "Frank," Brenda's voice was ice, "you are the subject of the discussion. You do not get a rebuttal." "Actually, Brenda, I do. As a homeowner in good standing, which I am, as I'm all paid up on my dues, I have a right to speak." I walked to the front of the room, right next to her stupid projector. "You're right about one thing, Brenda," I started, my voice calm and clear. "This all started with a bylaw. This one." I pulled a single, folded piece of paper from my blazer pocket. I unfolded it. It was the original violation letter. "This is the letter you sent me. The inciting incident, as it were. It cited Bylaw 8.4, Surface Integrity. It fined me for cracks. Unsightly, hazardous cracks." I looked around the room, making eye contact with my neighbors. "My question for the board, and for Brenda, is simple. Does my driveway currently have any cracks?" Brenda opened her mouth. Todd jumped in. "Well, no, but it's blue." "Thank you, Todd." "No, it does not have cracks. The violation was cracks. The cracks are gone. They have been repaired and filled. The violation as specified in this letter is cured. I have complied." But, aesthetic harmony," Brenda sputtered, pointing to Bylaw 2.1. "You're ignoring the other bylaw." "Am I?" I said. "I looked up that bylaw too. I love the bylaws, Brenda. They're fascinating. Bylaw 2.1, aesthetic harmony is, and I quote, intended to prevent blight, disrepair, and structural neglect. It's to stop people from having junked cars on their lawns. It's to stop, blight." I turned to the crowd. "Is my driveway blight? Is it disrepair?" "No," yelled Gary. "It's beautiful," yelled Mrs. Peters. "Or," I continued, "is it, as the Channel 8 News called it, a local destination? A stunning work of art?" I turned back to Brenda, who was now a pale, chalky white. "You didn't find me for aesthetic harmony. You find me for cracks. I fixed the cracks. You can't change the violation halfway through just because you don't like the color of the repair." I wasn't done. "And you know what? You talk about harmony. You talk about community. Fining people for the color of their mailbox?" I pointed at Gary, who stood up. "She fined me $50, Gary yelled. "For a blue mailbox. She said it was overly cheerful." "And my petunias?" Mrs. Peters stood up, her small voice shaking. "She sent me a letter saying my petunias were provocative and attracted too many bees." Suddenly, the room was buzzing. Everyone had a story. Fines for non-uniform welcome mats, warnings for clashing holiday decorations. "This isn't about harmony, Brenda," I said, my voice rising. "This is about control. This is about your control. And you're mad because for once, someone read your rulebook and followed it to the letter, just not in the way you wanted." I looked at the board members. "You're proposing a $5,000 fine and legal action? Over a repaired crack? The one that you demanded I fix? The news is right outside. How do you think that's going to look?" The two captive board members looked at each other. They looked at Brenda. They looked at the angry crowd. They looked terrified. Gary stood up again. "I'd like to make a motion." Brenda's gavel banged. "You're out of order." "I'd like to make a motion," Gary yelled over her. "A motion to dismiss all fines and legal actions against resident 142, Frank Palmer. A motion to formally recognize his superior repair as compliant with all HOA bylaws." "Seconded," yelled Mrs. Peters. "You can't do that," Brenda shrieked. "It's a motion, Brenda. We're homeowners. We get to vote." The room was chanting, "Vote, vote, vote." One of the board members, a mousy woman named Pam, finally spoke. "Brenda, we have to call the vote. It's been motioned and seconded." Brenda looked at her, betrayed. "Fine," she seethed. "All in favor of dismissing the fines and approving this monstrosity?" A sea of hands went up. Mine, Gary's, Mrs. Peters, almost everyone in the room. "All opposed?" Brenda asked, her voice a tiny, defeated squeak. Brenda's hand shot up. Todd's hand shot up, wavered, and then, as he looked around at the glaring crowd, he slowly put it back down. It was just Brenda. The motion passed. The room erupted. People were cheering. Gary was patting me on the back. Cindy Matthews and her cameraman had discreetly opened the back door and were filming the whole thing. Brenda stared, her face completely, utterly blank. She grabbed her gavel, her clipboard, and her pride, and she stormed out the front door, right past the news camera. The beige Stapo had fallen. A week later, I was on my porch. It was a perfect, cool November evening. The sun was setting. I had a cold beer in my hand. Luna was sitting on the steps, drinking one of mine. The driveway was glorious. It had fully cured, and in the golden hour light, it was literally glowing. The blue river looked deep and cool, and the sunburst was shooting tiny, beautiful golden reflections onto the front of my garage. It was a masterpiece. "So," Luna said, taking a sip, "I just got 3 new commissions, all in this neighborhood." I sat up. "You're kidding. Who?" "Gary, for starters. He wants a Mosaic bird bath. He said, and I quote, 'Make it as overly cheerful as humanly possible.' He's thinking phoenixes." "Perfect," I laughed. "Then, Mrs. Peters, she wants me to tile her provocative flower boxes with bright red and purple flowers, bee-attracting ones specifically." "That's fantastic, Luna." "And get this," she said, a sly grin spreading across her face. "Todd." I nearly dropped my beer. "Todd? Across the street? Brenda's little minion, Todd?" "The one and only," Luna cackled. "He cornered me when I was picking up my check from Gary. He wants me to do a mosaic of his favorite football team's logo on his back patio." "His back patio?" "Yep." He whispered the whole time and kept checking over his shoulder. Luna took a long drink. He said, and I quote, "Brenda can't see it from the street, and my wife thinks it's a great idea. The rebellion is spreading, Frank. It's a full-on beige surrection." I leaned back in my chair and laughed. Brenda, as it turned out, had put her house on the market 3 days after the meeting. The listing described the neighborhood as quiet with eclectic charm. Gary was running, unopposed, for the new HOA president. My fine, of course, was dropped. My driveway was, by all accounts, a work of art. I looked at the light dancing on my garage door. Brenda had wanted to fill a tiny, insignificant crack with gray, joyless sludge. She had wanted to shame the driveway into conformity. Instead, we filled it with color. We filled it with art. We filled it with light. And it turned out, the entire neighborhood was just waiting for someone to finally break the beige. I raised my bottle to the sparkling, defiant, beautiful scar on my driveway. "2 superior repairs," I said. It was the best fix I'd ever made.